Hi, welcome to my podcast. I want to welcome Alex to the. Now, Alex is a rune caster and you author, and you do numerology by the looks of it. So we're going to unpack Alex's journey and how he got into the runes, and then he's going to show and tell some books and some runes, and give us a bit of insight and knowledge around the runes and stuff. And then we're going to look into his book. So it's going to be broken down for anyone that is joining now. Please check the description box, and you can find Alex's information, where to find him, and you can book a reading, because he does online stuff, and and you can also his books, where you can find his books, is all in the description box. So welcome, Alex. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much
for coming along. I really appreciate it. So I'm quite interested in the fact of the runes, although I really struggled from the very beginning to understand it. But I used to ask yes and no, which we did speak a little bit last night when we did a bit of a sound check. But before we get to that point, I just want to, could you introduce yourself and sort of give us a little bit of history behind what got you onto this path, and and how it all began.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Carrie-Anne. I'm based in South Wales now, I should say, so not too far, just across the bridge from where Carrie-Anne is. But as you can probably, if anybody's listening, tell by this accent, I'm not Welsh. I'm originally from the Sherwood Forest in Nottinghamshire, Robin Hood country. And I like to describe that as a land of magic and mystery, because it very much is, with lots of legends like the Robin Hood legends and Lord Byron, etc. And for myself, then, I was born there a long time ago. I'm very old, really, a lot older than Carrie-Anne. And I'd known from an early age that I was a natural psychic, a natural clairvoyant. But there's no tradition in my family. There's nobody, not parents, sister, etc. I didn't have a great auntie who read tea leaves or anything like that. Nothing, no spiritualist churches, etc. So I wasn't sort of particularly encouraged in that way, and didn't talk, as children tend not to say much about it, because you tend to get dismissed as if you're very strange. Just odd things like I would sometimes watch something on television and know what might happen, or I might know what was going to happen. But grew up and well into my teens and didn't do anything about it. I'm very historically based. I love history. And like most historians, you tend to specialize in a particular period. So some people might do Roman history or First World War, etc. For me, it was Anglo-Saxon history, the period that's often called the Heptarchy, which means the seven kingdoms. Because for a long time, England, not so much Wales really, but England was separated into seven different kingdoms: Wessex, Northumbria, East Anglia, etc. And these would vie for power. And in one century, one of them was ahead of the others, and then they fell back, etc. King Alfred, of course, was part of this, who's most famous king in that period. People remember King Alfred for his stand against the Vikings and the Normans, etc. So that fitted with me, because the particular fascination I had was the Vikings and the way that they affected British life. When they invaded Britain and they stayed for 300 or 400 years, off and on, they'd come and go and come and go, and eventually start to settle and mix with the British people, who were then, of course, the Celtic people. They and the Angles and the Saxons, the impact they had always fascinated me. And I mean, there's sort of Hollywood films, old films like with Kirk Douglas and Tony Curtis called The Vikings. A very glamorous thing it was to a young man, and for many people, it's not glamorous at all when you look at it. But that was the image, really. And of course,
it's quite brutal, isn't it?
yeah, the runes were part of that. Just gonna have a sip now.
Yeah. So where did where did the runes base from? Was it from the Saxons or was it from the Vikings? Or was that
No, I mean, there's lots of
I
stuff.
love history, but
Yeah, there's
my
lots of
noodle
stuff
don't sink it
yeah,
all
there's
in.
stuff
So
online that's often very, very misleading. It's quite clear when you look at it. It's the Viking people, so the Viking invaders. So now the modern Scandinavians, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, they were the inventors, creators, if you like, of the runes. We have prehistoric rock carvings, which are anything between 2.5 and 3,000 years old, which depict the runes quite crudely. And so we think of it as a Viking thing, a Nordic thing. And the great thing about the Vikings, of course, is they were mighty travelers and mighty explorers. So they traveled all over the place. They went as far east as Russia and the Baltic states. I was in the Baltic states a few years ago, Estonia and Latvia, all around Western Europe. And of course, they came to Britain. Now, these are historical facts. No one disputes their journey. They would often fight with people, or they would trade with people, often a bit of both. And they went as far south as Greece and Turkey, which is a mighty trip, and possibly what we now call Iran and Iraq. Now, you, Kerry-Ann, can jump on a plane at Bristol Airport and you can fly to Athens or Istanbul fairly quickly. But for these people to get there was an immense journey. But they did it.
Yeah. Do you reckon how long do you reckon they took? I mean, that's miles.
Well,
they must have gone through some horses.
Greece and Turkey, you're certainly talking days, not hours. But they invented, I'm not a sailor, but they invented various sailing techniques. So the long hull of the ship to sort of streamline the water. Okay. So they were way ahead of their time. And they, by the time they came to Britain, the Angles and the Saxons and the Jutes had already invaded Britain and driven the Celtic people, what we now call, if you like, the Welsh people, into what is now Wales. And what happened, you see, is that lots of the tribes they came into contact with inherited or pinched, if you like, the runes from them. So it began as a Viking thing, but by the time the Angles and the Saxons in the Germanic lands, what we modern now Germany, Holland, Denmark, Austria, etc., they already had got the runes in their locker, and so they brought them to Britain. This is what confuses people, because the Viking didn't come until the end of the 8th century, but by the time, and so people think, and there's evidence that the runes were practiced 200 or 300 years earlier in Britain. So people think, oh, it can't have been a Viking thing. What they're missing is that the Vikings had already handed them on to the Angles and the Saxons before they came to Britain. That's what people miss. So it became part of British life. And I say to people when I do my workshops or when I read, I say to people, the heyday of the runes is probably from about 1,500 years ago to 1,000 years ago. So if you or anybody grown up in Britain and Northern Europe in that 500-year corridor, you would have been very much more familiar with the runes in a way that people aren't today. I mean, you've got a set, I know, and you've got a bit of an interest, but a lot of people know nothing at all. Or if they do know, they know this much. They've seen a documentary on Netflix, they've seen a documentary on Netflix, or they've read a book. But had you been a young woman growing up then with a problem to solve or a question to answer, you would probably have gone to the wise man or wise woman of the tribe, and he or she would have used the runes to guide you.
So it wasn't like so because when I sort of like looked at the history of it, right, going back when I first got the runes, I always perceived it was like a male energy casting, not a female. So that's like a...
That's an interesting point, because a couple of fortune tellers, clairvoyants that I've met, and over the years I've met plenty, a couple of female ones, have said to me, I can't get on with the runes, Alex, but then again, I think it's more a male thing. So I know why you say that, but I think that that's not necessarily the case. There's no reason why a woman can't do it, but it's just that some people think maybe they call to masculine energy a bit more, maybe more, say, than tarot, but I'm not sure. I think that's a minor thing. And I think if you want to do it, you can do it, you know. So people, you might have worn runic jewelry, you might have worn a necklace or a brooch or something. Warriors would decorate the hilts of the swords or their shields with runes to bring them luck in battle. And people use them as a
It was
blessing.
like a charm then as well. So it wasn't just about a casting thing. It was like they used it for a charm base as well. Like we would with crystals.
Yeah, like people do with crystals or with symbols. A blessing or a curse. Or people have cursed them. There was something called a nidstong pole for centuries, which is a long wooden pole carved with a horse's head, or sometimes they'd use a real horse's head and put it on, and they'd put runes around it, and you would try and curse someone with that if someone was your enemy. You could also often use a love token to get someone to fall madly in love with you, because I will be explaining the runes are very passionate. They're very sexy. Right. It's quite erotic and sexy. It's part of it, which appeals to people. It's very primitive. It's very earthy. And it's very, very Northern European. And the big issue for me is, and why I've been a professional runecaster for 17 years, but I've been involved with the runes a lot longer. But the issue I've always had, and I'll have all my life really, is that people don't know enough about them. People, look, Kerry-Ann, everybody knows tarot. You don't have to have had a reading. Yeah. Everybody knows. Everybody knows what a medium is. You might not like it. Yeah. You might not agree with it, but you know what you'll get if you go to a medium. You'll get messages from people that have gone. We know that. Everybody knows astrology. It makes me smile because people say, that astrology, what a load of rubbish. But then again, I'm a Pisces. You know,
I struggle with like, I know a little, again, I know it, maybe a little bit more than I would the runes.
Yeah.
But it gets me by with but I still got to look in,
But you can see the point I'm making. I think you would struggle to find anybody in Britain, unless they just arrived from the other side of the world, maybe. You struggle to find anybody in Britain that doesn't know what star sign they are. Everybody knows. Even if you think it's rubbish, even if you think it's silly, superstitious nonsense, and you would never dream, you still know what you are. It's just like part of life. But when I say I'm a rune caster, I still get a lot of blank looks because of it. It's not well known. So this is partly why.
It's an unusual craft. I mean, I've gone to spiritual events and that. I don't think I've actually seen a rune casters as they're not. I don't see. I haven't. If I have, I've probably seen one out of the many spiritual places.
True. And when I go to fairs, I go to mind, body, spirit events, psychic fairs. I go to quite a lot. I'm almost always the only person doing runes. Obviously, I go to them in South Wales. I don't travel to London. But what you find is that I am aware of 2 or 3 other people that do runes, but with respect to them, they tend to do it as their 4th or 5th thing. So they're really tarot, angel cards, oracle cards, and runes a bit further down. It's a bit of a sideline. I'm not aware of anybody in South Wales, anyway, that is runes first and last. An actual rune caster. And I think,
can you sort of explain to people what runes are? I mean, you've gone through a little bit of the history of it.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm going to show you.
Because we're getting into that aspect. I mean, I've got my little bag too.
Yeah, well, I'm going to show you.
The same bag as my other bag broke, but it was many years.
I just randomly picked them then. They are my runes. I call them stones, but these are actually made of clay. I've got 3 or 4 sets that have been made for me. They're clay painted on. So they're all symbols, in a way that, well, a bit different to tarot, because tarot cards are always painted on the cards, aren't they?
Yeah.
That's a protection rune. They've all got names, obviously, but I might go into that a bit later. So these are these runes there, okay? Now, these are clay. I've also got a set that are pebbles. My wife and I we live fairly close to a beach. So we've got we went onto a beach with lots of stones and pebbles, and that's great because you can pick the pebbles, and of course the great thing about them is no two pebbles are exactly the same size and shape, so they're completely different. You manufacture them and you paint them on. I once went to a house in West Wales. The lady was I suppose she wouldn't mind me calling her a new age hippie, and she was a woodworker, and she had a caravan porta cabin workshop in the back.
Wow, nice.
And beautifully, very kindly, she presented me with a set of runes that she'd handmade specially for me. And she'd carved them out of wood. What a wonderful thing to do. Yeah.
That is amazing.
Terrific. Yeah. I've got different sets, but this set I feel particularly comfortable with. So each rune then, directly or indirectly, represents a Norse god or goddess. Because what we need to address now, and this is what puts people off, but if they do, they'll go away and make a cup of tea, is that the runes are very much a pagan thing. Yeah. It is completely not Christian. The Norse, I'm a pagan. I'm a Norse pagan.
So what is pagan?
Pagan comes from the Latin paganus, which means dweller in the countryside.
Right. Okay.
And it's basically an earth type of worship. Pagans don't normally have, we don't have churches, we don't have cathedrals, we don't have temples. We worship the outside, if you like, and worship within. Yeah. Paganism is really, I suppose, a different selection of beliefs. But the big thing is that it's not monotheistic, it's multitheistic. So in other words, we have lots more than one God. Now,
right, okay, so, yeah.
And this is the big problem for Christians. Obviously, we all understand. I mean, although I'm not a Christian, of course, I've grown up in a Christian country. Well, nominally anyway. So that to a Christian, you're allowed one God, no more. Mm-hmm. And that one God, by definition for them, is perfect. The Christian God doesn't make mistakes. He's omnipotent. He made the world in 7 days, if you believe the Bible literally. So when paganism and Christianity were side by side in Britain and all over Europe, really, they clashed and they had an uneasy alliance because the Christians found it increasingly difficult to accept there was a religion which they found blasphemous, because to a Christian, it's blasphemous to say that there's more than one God.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, again, Norse gods, Norse mythology, I would say, and I'm going to show you one of my books in a bit. Norse mythology is a fascinating subject, but it's a subject, again, that I like to try and revive. That's why I do workshops. That's why I wrote the book. Well, I did it partly to make money, but apart from that,
honest, Alex.
Making money. Well, yeah. Well, that's an important point. Runecasting is my business. Yeah. It's not my hobby. Yeah. It's what I do.
Yeah.
Okay? So, but you see, the Norse legends are there, and we've got all kinds of gods. We've got hundreds of gods, hundreds of goddesses, and so Christianity found that very, very difficult. And around about the 10th, 11th century, by the time of the Norman conquest, then, which is probably the most significant date ever in British history, 1066, that changed everything. Everything.
Really?
Well, yeah, because the Normans came over and took over, and they brushed aside the Saxons. And William the Conqueror was a Norman. He put all his barons and all the people that had helped him win the battle. He brushed aside the Saxon nobles, kicked them off their land. They became at best servants and at worst slaves. The language was flooded with French. It changed the language, Norman French. The peasants had to learn Norman French if they wanted to survive, really. So that language died. But before that happened then, the runes were everywhere. And you see, for whatever reason, the Christian people that are now in charge, because the Normans were Christians too, they saw the runes as a particularly bad example of why pagans are a horrible bunch. To Christians, runes was like devil worship, demonic, diabolical, and they hated it so much that in many kingdoms, I mean, I've explained there were different kingdoms, some were stricter than others, but in many parts, certainly in Britain, if you were caught with a set of these babies, you could be put to death.
So a bit like the witches' trials. The witches' trials was very much the same, wasn't it?
Yes, I mean that was much later, but yes, you see, they would probably have been associated. If you're a Runecaster, if you practice the runes, you must be a bad person. That was the message,
Yeah,
because you should be worshipping God and nobody else. You shouldn't be
yeah.
worshipping Thor and Odin and Freya and Loki. Now it went underground. They couldn't really stamp it out, but it went underground, practiced in secret. And it wasn't until probably the 1920s or 1930s, and that's only 100 years ago, that the runes made a bit of a comeback. And it made a comeback in Central Europe, in Germany and Austria. I could elaborate why, but maybe that's for another time. There's a reason why, but
Okay, yeah.
it came back. But even now, as I say,
If you
100
want to hear more, let us know in the
yeah,
comments,
yeah.
and then I can bring back Alex.
Well,
I'm
I mean,
fascinated.
people are welcome to contact me, but that's a small issue,
Yeah.
really. The issue is that even though it came back a bit, it was only a bit. And it's still the case, even after all my years and all my publicity and all the things I do, runes are not anywhere near as well known as tarot. They're just
That's
not.
true.
And they're
Yeah.
not. People know about angel cards and oracle cards and
Yeah.
say mediumship, etc. I mean, mediumship was really had its major arrival in the 19th century. Mediumship is pretty, generally speaking, there. So
It's really interesting though, Alex, because I just got a little story on how I got the rune stones. I was 16 years old at the time, and I was living with my boyfriend, the girl's dad, and his sister ordered the tarot and the rune stones off of this public, that you used to be able to order out of it. Well, she ended up having two sets. So she gave me a pack of a tarot deck, which was the Mythic Tarot, and I got the rune stones.
right.
So I started. I didn't touch the Mythic Tarot until a bit later on, but I started pulling the rune stones, and I would be asking silly questions like, "Is my money going to be in today?" You know. And I would pull, and if it was upside down, it would be a no, and if it was the right way round, it'd be a yes. And each time, I was amazed. Each time it would come true, and that's what got me into this. Got me more curious, and then I started playing with the tarot. I struggled because I'm dyslexic, and the logic, because it's quite in depth, isn't it? The old version books are quite in depth.
Absolutely.
I found it hard to store the information, so I kind of went tarot, but that is, that's how I got into like like the tarot was through the runes itself.
Well, what I would say to you is, I mean, no disrespect to tarot, and it's a great thing. A lot of people, but really, tarot is medieval, and it's Central European. The runes, the great thing about the runes is, and the thing that I want to get across to people, if more than anything else, is it's central to Northern European culture. And anybody that grew up in Britain or Scandinavia or Germany, Holland, that top bit, it's in your blood, but you don't know it's in your blood. And that's why it works. Because when I read for people, what I'm doing, I'm taking them back 1,000 years. So if I were to read for Kerry Ann, I would let you see the Kerry Ann that you were 1,000 years ago. When times were different and simpler, people had a proper understanding then of life. We were closer to nature. With that paganism, we understood. I mean, we're only able to talk today because of technology, and I understand that. And technology is a wonderful thing. You can Skype your friend in New Zealand, you can text people, all the rest of it. It's wonderful, but there are downsides to the fact that it's not particularly people friendly or human based, and it can distort things. So if it's possible, clearly it's not always, if it's possible, I like to visit people when I read for them, because I like face to face. And sometimes sometimes I will press a rune in someone's hand to burn the rune into their hand. Sometimes I will hold. Yeah, you're
Enlighten me on what's the burn. What do you mean by burning it on the hand?
I mean, I want you to feel. I'll ask you to close your palm, and then you'll
Yeah.
normally feel a tingle, a little fiery tingle. Won't hurt you, and starts to get into your blood a little bit. Now, if I'm doing that, if I'm doing it online, clearly I can't. So what I do, I will send it. I've got them all saved into my docs, all the runes. So during the reading, I'll send them a picture of the rune. But it's not quite the same. But if I'm going to somebody's house, you see, I'll say, okay, or they'll say, right, that's the rune I think you want to concentrate on. I might give you two. And I want you to take a piece of it, take a picture of it on your mobile, because none of us go far without our mobile these days. Or
That's true.
I want you to draw it on a piece of paper or a piece of card. And if it's a woman, and 90% of my clients are women, put that in your purse. A woman don't go far without a purse. So every now and again, when you get the chance, look at it, study it. I burned it into your hand. I want to burn it into your brain. And I'm giving you that rune because now I'm read for you. I believe that's a significant symbol for you. And I'll be telling you why.
Oh, okay.
So I might give you Freya's rune. I might give you this. I even say, sleep with it under your pillow, which is a bit spooky, but it's fine. It doesn't hurt you. It won't give you brain injuries. Do it okay. But obviously, I've got clients all over the UK and beyond. I've read for people in USA, Canada, Spain, Italy. I mean, the Spanish one was an expat, was a Brit living in Spain. You know, because obviously I can't do it in Spanish, can I? But you know, Africa, Namibia, or even if it's like, say, it was Bristol or Liverpool or Manchester, I've got to do it online then. So that's where it's great having online.
I don't know. I would come and visit you, Alex.
Would you? I mean,
I would for the road trip. I like road trip.
I mean, probably I'm a bit old-fashioned because as you can tell, I'm not exactly a teenager, and I didn't grow up with the internet, so it's not automatic to me. But when I read for people who are under 40, certainly under 30, very often their first thought is, can I do it on my iPad? Can I do it on my iPhone? Because that's natural to them. And in probably in 30 or 40 years, everybody will be like that. But you know, I would say to people,
I mean, I worked in the phone lines for a while. I didn't like the phone lines. I gotta be honest. I didn't feel like I was in control of what was going on. Whereas when you're like doing it as you know, like you're the one in, you know, I can close down the reading when I wanted to. You know, especially if I felt like I couldn't get anything from it, weren't linking. So there was a number of reasons behind it. Whereas when I was doing it for another company, I found the pressure was too much, and I just and it was just it wasn't very cared about the person, because they get the 20 minutes and then that's it. You're cut off, and you know, where.
Yeah, I mean, when somebody approaches me for a reading, I'll say to them, where do you live? What area? And if they're within a reasonable distance, I'll drive. Actually, people don't come to me, I go to them. So I go and sit in their house. I live in South Wales. I live in a town called Bridgend. You may have heard of it in South Wales. It's halfway between Cardiff and Swansea. So it's an ideal location.
Not far, really.
No, it's about 70 miles from Bristol. I'm on the M4 corridor, so you can easily get on the motorway. So I can go east, west. I go up the valleys. But if they're more than a reason, I would probably go 20, 25 miles away ish. Otherwise, it's not cost effective. It's no good.
I understand.
I can't be driving because I mean, I can't drive like 50 miles away for one person, because that's a 100-mile round trip. My average reading only lasts 30 to 40 minutes. So I'd be traveling 2 hours. It's not worth it. So, but you know, if people are local, fair enough. And you talked about time. I don't put a time limit on people. It is what it is. When I do the reading, I then say to people, do you want to ask any questions? Now, the answer might be no, because the anything they were going to ask has already been covered by the general reading. That happens a lot. Or they might say, no, thanks, thank you very much, goodbye. Or they might say, I want to ask you one or two or three. There's no limit, really.
And that was one of the questions I was going to ask. Do you have like specific spreads for different people, or do you just do what I call freestyle, which is like just taking I do cards, so like, you know, casting out in but not in any particular order, and then kind of reading and intuitively seeing what.
Let me tell you then. Imagine I'm sat with you now in Filton, and we're at the side of the coffee table, right? We've had a cup of coffee. You might need to make me more than one cup. I drink a lot of coffee.
That's fine.
Okay. So there are 25 runes in that bag. Okay.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about the different rune decks. We'll call them decks, if you like, sets. I will ask you to select randomly 9. The reason it's 9 is because in my Norse pagan beliefs, we have 9 worlds, like the Christians have your heaven and hell. Okay. So you're selecting one. I don't detail what they are, that's irrelevant, but one for each world. Then I interpret for you those 9. Every time 9. Then I say to you, do you want to ask any questions? So sometimes people say, give me your price list, scale of charges. It's just what it is. I may as well tell you, it's £25. Okay. So I charge £25 for those runes, irrespective of whether you have no questions, 3, 4, or whatever. I will tell you a story, a funny story, when I talk about as many questions as you like. I went to visit a woman some years ago in a beautiful, rather posh, picturesque village in the Vale of Glamorgan. And I met there. I said hello to her husband. He stayed down there watching the telly. And we went up into this beautiful house. She got into like a sort of a back room, back bedroom type of thing with plenty of space. It was quite late anyway when we started. And I said to her then, would you like to ask any question? Kerry Ann, she produced 2 sides of A4 of questions.
Oh my God.
And I counted, and she asked me 17 questions. But
wow,
there weren't really different questions, because I don't think there are 17 questions in the world. They were just recycling. Yeah, but what about this? What about this? Her mind was very troubled, and she was going from one to the other. And I had an image of her head being like spinning plates, and she could never quite get to it. We finished at 1:45 in the morning. And when we came downstairs, as I went, I thought, goodness knows what her husband thinks I've been doing with his wife in the bedroom till 1:45 in the morning. But he didn't. I think he was probably used to it. And I often wonder how she is, because I don't know if she was actually even listening, because her mind was so troubled. And really, I don't know if she wanted me. I think she wanted a counsellor. And I don't mean a Lib Dem one. I mean a counsellor. You know, I think her mind.
No, I get it.
But that's that is an extreme case. You know,
that's why I always used to give options to record the readings, because you're not absorbing all the information. And you know, when I do my personal readings, because I do it to do with training and testing my abilities.
Yeah.
And I go back, I usually find it takes about 3 to 4 months before something starts to sort of like take, you might hit a few nerves, but actually when you're sort of like predicting, I suppose, or like when stuff is coming forward, it's usually about 3 to 4 months, maybe 6 months. Actually, I have done one, and it's been over a year it came about, but it was down to the fact of the mindset of the other person and when they were ready. So it was still in their field, and they're still in their energy field. I got a message randomly, oh my God, you ain't gonna believe this. You said ... because they wrote it all down, the information, and then they said this is happening now. And that was like, and they didn't believe me. They couldn't, they didn't believe that, because, and it never came about, but it took. So it's good. I've done readings randomly, and wished I recorded it or took notes more because I remember the reading, but I don't remember the full details of the reading.
Okay.
You know? So do
Well,
you give an option for others to record the reading?
yes, absolutely. Again, usually it's by phone. I'll either do the show, or they'll say, would you mind, look at doing it. I sometimes say to people, you are welcome to record it, but then I say, but please don't ask me how to do it, because I'm not at all technical and I can't help you. So if they can't do it themselves, I can't help them. But just in terms of time, what I also say, a little slightly different point about time, what I say to people when I've done the reading is, I don't think you should have another reading with me within at least 6 months, because you need time for it to settle. So if I read for you again in 2 or 3 months, I'm liable to be saying the same thing as I've told you already, and I'm not going to rip you off by charging you twice for the same service.
Yeah, no, I get it. Yeah, that makes sense.
I mean, if somebody comes back after 4.5, 5 months and say they really want another reading, we might do it, but that's the time, because it's a professional thing. And I don't want to be, I say to people, I mean, you wouldn't, get an electrician in and then 3 months later get him in just to do it all over again. That's what your work is. That's an important thing.
And I just want to put like a disclaimer there, because one of my friends is they had a reading done, and it was very baseline stuff, what you would say to anybody, but then they started pestering that person over and over and over again, and I said to this person, I said, you need to block them, report them. They are like that. Any kind of reader would not pester you, for starters, or like what you were saying, Alex, they wouldn't be like trying to sell you another reading. That they would want you to be, like illustrating that.
I think it's fair to say, I think I would say there are more charlatans, more con men, con women in this business than probably any other business. And this is the problem, you see, as you know. Anybody, and I mean anybody, can get themselves a pack of cards or a set of runes off Amazon, or go to Glastonbury and get them. You're quite close to Glastonbury, aren't you? And then there's a little instruction book with it, and they read the book, and that's it. They're away and think they're going to be a professional worker. They're not, but you can't stop them. There's nothing. You're not breaking the law. And I say to people, I'm completely self-taught. Nobody's taught me, and nobody needs to teach me. And every now and again, I get people say, will you teach me to be a Runcaster? My answer is no, I won't do it. And I'll try and keep it brief, but the reason is, in my opinion, you've got to be born to be able to do it. It's got to be in your nature, and very few people could do it. Secondly, all I could do if I taught someone is teach them the basic parrot fashion meanings. That runes a journey. That's this, and that's this much good. You read intuitively, so different runes mean different things to different people. And what I would say is you need to be, if not an expert, very, very knowledgeable on Norse mythology. So you need to be learning Norse mythology, because it's so much tied up with it. Okay. And that's something you can't teach. Get yourself a couple of good books. And I also say to people, from starting to look at the runes and to deciding I was going to do it professionally, learning was about 3 years. And people expect
it takes time.
And I'm still, I mean, nobody's perfect. I'm still learning, but I've learned a lot over years. So I will support people on the journey. So if people want to say, I mean, my workshops are just introduction. In the morning, we do Norse mythology. And I look at the Norse legends. When we have a break for a sandwich, then in the afternoon, we do runes. And I look at general stuff. But that doesn't mean, I always stress, you won't walk away being a Runecaster. Absolutely you won't. But it gives you a flavour. If you're so interested now, you're so fascinated, you want to take the steps on your own journey, good luck, and keep in touch with me. And if I can help you, if I can advise you, that's what emails are for, that's what video calls are for. But I'm not going to teach you. I'm not going to give people a little certificate that says, congratulations, you are now an accredited Runecaster, and sign it and stamp it and charge them X quid for that. I'm not letting them loose in the community with a set of runes when they're not good enough to do it. I tell you a story. Somebody came to one of my work. First of all, this bloke came to one of my talks. Then he comes to a workshop, no knowledge at all. 6 weeks later, he's not only doing rune readings, he's delivering his own workshops. Now, that's
wow.
Completely lacks the knowledge or the experience, but you can't stop them.
No.
So, yeah,
I've like from 16 onwards, and I used to make people have readings. You know, you will have readings. And then I done a friend of mine. She was a friend of mine. She taught me the baselines of tarot. And then I moved back to Bristol because I lived in Wales for a while. Caldicot.
Oh, not well. That's about 40 miles.
Yeah. So I lived there for a number of years. And you know, so I moved back to Bristol. So we were still in touch, but lost in touch. And then I started doing Reiki and stuff. You know, so I learned Reiki, crystal healing was the first, then Reiki. And then there was another course to do with the tarot. I would still play about with it, and I would still do readings with people. I'd done the tarot course, and then I'd done the phone rhymes, and then I went out and done it. But I found that actually because long story short, I was sort of like homebound for personal reasons, health reasons. So I started doing journaling with the tarot. And I learned more by probably doing that. Although, don't get me wrong, each step helped. But I learned more about myself by practicing the tarot through the journaling than I did anything else. So I think you've got to have a nature of counseling. Like you said, generally people need counseling, you know, so you have to have that knowledge about life as well, haven't you? And the trials and things that people go through. So, you know, I think the older you get, the more and the more experience you have with life, I think that alters your readings completely, you know, to how, and that's why it's so, there, you know, every tarot reader or rune reader or whatever healer, they bring a little bit of themselves to the readings that you can't get from anybody else. So if you say, for instance, you taught me the runes, I'm not going to have exactly the same knowledge as what you have, and I'm not going to have because my mind is going to be different to yours. So experiences of life is going to be different, you know. So we all bring something to the table that's slightly different to what others would, you know. That's my belief anyway, and that's why you know, I can't stand this competitiveness side, because there is a competitive side, because everyone's got a quality nature. It's the same as a carpenter, any, you know, artist. They bring their own unique style to the readings and stuff, you know. So we all got a, you know, and you got a history. You do the history side, you know, and like you said, you need to have an understanding of like the history behind it and stuff like that, you know. It wouldn't sink in. It would, you know, I would look.
Some people that have readings are fascinated by the Vikings. They're fascinated by Norse mythology, and some aren't. Some people are not interested at all in that. What they want is your traditional reading. What's going to happen to me? Will I get my new job? Will I meet the new love of my life, etc., etc.? So yes, Everybody's different. I mean, I spoke earlier saying that most of my clients are women. 90% of my clients are women. And I believe that's because a lot of men, obviously not all, for a lot of men, they see what I do and what you would do as silly, superstitious women's magazine rubbish. That's what a lot of men think.
Yeah.
And that's the way it is. And I think women are much more open-minded. They're more prepared to accept things and open themselves to things. A lot of men are very black and white. It's this, it's that, and nothing in between.
Yeah.
And when I do what I specialize in, really, if I can, if I get a chance to, is rune parties, where I go for a group of people. So all I want is one room to work in, separate room, and the other room for people to get drunk in. Because, you know, as you can see, I'm very scary, and people have to have Dutch courage to drink. But, you know, usually the hostess will get some wine in, they'll get some nibbles in, a few sandwiches, and the atmosphere there is quite electric. They're like kids at Christmas, because as they're coming into the room and going, then they say, what did Alex tell you? Did he tell you this? He told me this. Oh, I wonder what he'll tell me. And it's a good evening, and it's fun because it's just a night out, but it's almost always a girls' night.
Yeah.
And my wife will say to me when I come back in, how was your girls' night out? Or
I like your wife's sense of humor.
Yeah, or she'll say, did you enjoy your hen night? You know, it's that sort of thing. And obviously, for then, you see, I charge a discount. I mean, you know, you get a discount because there's more people. So for me, you see, again, it's got to be business orientated. So whereas if I come to one person, I'm doing so much. But if I'm reading for 4 or 5, there's no extra petrol costs. It's the same cost. So I'm prepared to drop the cost for a group of people as a discount. And that's it. And they go very well. But what I would say is, not always perhaps, but very frequently, you'll find that one of these women doesn't really want to be there. You can tell she's not really buying into it. But I think she's there because if she doesn't come, she'll be on her own that night because all her mates are with me. So she comes. And she's almost challenging you. Oh, you know, like this. Read for me. I bet you can't read for me, which is a bit silly.
I know the one,
because it's a waste of my time and also her money, because she's still going to have to pay me because she's paying me for my time.
And that's what I was saying earlier about I can, you know, like when you're doing it in those kind of settings, you already get the feel and the vibration of that, so you can sort of say, look, I'm not connecting with you. I don't feel I'm the right person. And usually I've got a few people that you can sort of like contact if you're interested in having a reading. You know, so you know that I would like say that are good, you know, good readers and stuff.
And
so,
I mean, this is it, you know, some people, and obviously, I know you accept this. Everyone accept this. Nothing works for everybody all the time.
No, that's right. Yeah,
I would say though, I'm fortunate enough to say that I think the runes work for most people most of the time. And I think that's because of this heritage, the fact that it's in your blood.
I'm fascinated.
So, you know, so long as it is, you see, you know, your ancestors, okay, you're a Bristolian. I don't know how much you know about your family tree, whether you've always been a Bristol family.
Well, my nan and granddad, they were from Ireland. So they were Irish descended, and I think they came over in the war, right, or just after the war. I mean, I don't know.
The First World War or the Second?
The Second World War.
Yeah, but you see,
my granddad was in my second. You know, my great granddad was in the Second World War. So you see, I mean, I don't know an awful lot, to be honest.
And if you think about it, for people in Britain, there's really no such thing as a pure-blood person, because if you look at the history of Britain, we've been invaded by everybody. Everybody's had a go at us. The Romans, the Normans, the Angles, the Saxons, they all had a go at us, the Vikings. So there's all that intermarrying. You see, I say to people, or people ask me, have I got any Viking Scandinavian heritage? As far as I know, no, but it's too far back to know. The Vikings came here all those centuries ago. Anybody, you might have some Scandinavian blood, But for family tree, there's only so far back you can go, Carrie Ann. You know?
Yeah, I mean,
Know.
our nan said that she had relatives in Scotland, so we were like kind of spread out a little bit. I never met them, you know. So and obviously my nan and granddad's passed away now, but
yeah, in the dim and distant past, then you've got Celtic blood. So your blood is probably a mixture of Celtic and Saxon, Germanic. You may have had some Viking ancestry, but it doesn't matter, because what I'm saying is that, you see, people talk about Nordic and Germanic, very similar. When people talk about Germanic centuries ago, they're not just talking about what we now call modern Germany. It would include Austria, Holland. I don't know whether you know, but the closest language to English that's still around is Dutch. Dutch and English are relatively similar. Okay? German and English aren't that different, but you've got English here, German there, and Dutch in the middle, which is like a cross between the two.
Yeah.
And that modern Holland. So, it doesn't matter what your ancestry is really. But it's that taking people back to a simpler time. The time that the runes were in the force, people understood the planet more. They understood the rhythm of the seasons more. They had short lives, much shorter lives. We are living longer, as you know, with every generation.
Yeah.
These people wouldn't have had the length of time that we have, not as a rule. There were obviously occasionally you'd have somebody. In those days, if you were 70, you were incredibly ancient. Whereas today, we don't think 70 is old. I mean, if you hear of a 70-year-old man or woman dying, you say, "Oh, that was quite young, weren't they?" Because it's not that. But those days,
I'd say 50 is the new 40.
Okay. Let me talk to you about the books and what happened.
Yeah.
I'm a writer.
Your books, or
yeah.
So
I was a writer anyway. I've written various fiction stories and things like that in magazines. I've always been very literary minded, but I decided to write that. Don't know whether you can see it. Nearly Normal.
Okay, let me just.
You might. I think you say have the blurb. Yeah, that's the one. The blurb's there, right?
Yeah.
And basically, it's a series of connected essays about me. It's sort of autobiographical. So it's about how I started with runes and about them. There's a chapter on numerology, the people I've met on my journey, the events I go to, Norse mythology, paganism. There's even a couple of real life ghost stories, which people find interesting.
I love ghost stories.
So I wrote it, and I didn't expect to make me rich. I joked at the time, Stephen King isn't worried about the competition. J.K. Rowling doesn't lie awake at night worrying how many books Alex is selling. But it's just the interest of it. And then for many years, you see, people were saying, could I recommend a book on Norse mythology? And I did. I'd check through Amazon and through sites and say, I think that's probably a good one for you, and recommend it and think, I hope that's all right for you. And then eventually one day I thought, why am I recommending other people's work? I'm actually quite capable of writing a book on Norse mythology.
Okay.
So why don't I do it? Why don't I do it? And what I did then was come up with this, which again, a different one now, but same thing, 9 World Journey. You want to get rid of that one?
Let me just slow it down a little bit, Alex, because I'm a bit slow. Why did you call it Nearly Normal? Why did you call the book Nearly Normal?
Because I don't think you'd call me a normal person. A normal, mature man doesn't spend his life shuffling pieces of clay around a tray and influencing people's lives. That's not really a normal thing to do. But a lot of my life is normal because I push my trolley around Tesco's or Sainsbury's like everybody does, or Asda.
Yeah.
I'm a massive football fan. I'm a massive cricket fan, and I watch that. And I do all the things normal people do and react in a normal way. So part of me is normal, but what I've chosen to do as a living, I mean, look, is far from that. I mean, who has ever heard of a Runcaster, for goodness sake? I mean, I used to have a normal job. I won't point what it was. I used to have an office job for many years until I decided to leave that and concentrate solely on the real love of my life, because my work is my passion and my life, my runes. It's a wonderful thing for me to do. But nearly normal because I'm sort of normal, but not really. Okay.
I like that. I'm nearly normal too, Alex. So
Absolutely.
we are like
I think
minds.
you'd probably say anybody that reads cards or tarot or is a medium, you wouldn't really call them normal. You wouldn't call them mainstream because they're outside the normal. But that was it. So, but it was the other book. I mentioned 9 Worlds, and that's why it's called 9 World Journey. And basically, that's more like a textbook. That's more like a textbook for beginners. Yeah, that's the one there.
Okay.
With the original illustrations, and it goes through most of the main Norse legends. And what I would say
you've
to
got
people,
like giants and elves here. What?
those 2 are ravens. Those 2 on the cover, they're ravens.
Yeah.
So because Odin, who many people will have heard of, he had 2 ravens that sat on his shoulder. And every morning he sent them round to fly around the Norse world to pick up all the dirt, all the gossip on people and whisper it back in his ear, because Odin was a control freak, and he likes to be top dog. And he was able to try and manipulate things. One of these ravens are called Hugin and Munin, thought and memory. And they never forget anything. And Odin has all that in his head. So that's why 9 World Journey, because of the 9 I do. And again, what I would say to people.
So can you explain to us the ninth world? So in each section, what, from the beginning of the, 1, 2, 3, and why it's 9 world? Because you were saying about the rune stones. You were saying about the rune stones of, like, how, when you were like casting, that you bring 9 out, which is the 9th world.
Well, there was originally a world of fire and a world of ice, the Niflheim and Muspelheim, and there were 2 worlds of opposites. And for goodness knows how many eon centuries, they would spin separately. And then in an echo of what our scientists would call a Big Bang theory, they collided. And that's what's called Ginunga Gap. It's like the creation of world. And when that happened, other worlds began to be formed. There's a world for elves. There's a light Helfheim, Svartalfheim, light-skinned elf, Darkspillheim. There's Asgard, which is the realm of the, if you like, the top gods. There's Vanaheim, which was the sort of slightly lesser gods. Eventually, they became joined together. There's Jotunheim, where the giants lived. That's about it. We've got the worlds there. So, and all these worlds are, there's Helheim, which is partly where you go when you're dead. But people get confused because it's not the same as the Christian hell, which is a place of torment and fire and brimstone. Much calmer than that. And all these worlds are suspended. Oh, there's also Midgard, which is where little humans like you and I live. And I'm sure you're aware of J.R. Tolkien, who wrote, obviously he wrote The Lord of the Rings and Hobbit.
I loved all that.
He was very much a medieval history scholar, and he called one of his worlds Middle Earth. You talk about Middle Earth?
Yeah.
Well, Midgard or Midyard, that is really where we got that from. Midyard, the middle of the earth. Okay, a lot of this stuff is based on mythology, and these worlds are suspended from a tree, Yggdrasil. Some think it's a yew tree, some think it's an ash tree, and they're all balanced from the branches. And at the foot of this tree are women called Nornir, or Norn maidens, who are weaving the web of fate with the needles. Okay, and even the gods and goddesses cannot entirely escape their fate. That's the difference between paganism and God.
I like that. Yeah.
For a Christian, the idea that God has to be limited or confronted is blasphemous again. God is everything. God is everywhere. He's perfect. Our gods are not. I mean, And what I would say to people, seriously, even if you've got no interest in runes, even if you think that fortune telling is a load of rubbish, as people do, you've come across them in your life, everybody does,
Yeah.
then you can still read and enjoy Norse mythology, because they are basically adult fairy tales. And it talks about
fairy tales.
and it talks about the human condition.
Yeah.
And our gods, you see, they're far from perfect, because they represent human nature, and humans are not perfect. And so
No, we're not.
they have love and hate and jealousy and greed. Read the stories, they're frequently caught in bed with the wrong person. It's quite sexy. So they reflect it. And so Norse mythology is standalone. You don't need to believe in anything psychic. You could think that Alex and Kerry-Ann are both off their head, and you know, they've got no
That's
idea.
all right. It's not something new.
It's all a load of cobbler. But Norse mythology is part of your British culture, which again we've forgotten because it was pushed aside by Christianity. We don't teach it to kids at school. And if you were to go after we finished into Filton now with a clipboard, and you stop 100 people for me, and you say, excuse me, can you tell me what do you know about Norse mythology? You ain't going to get much. People just don't know. Unless you stumble across someone that's got, you might come across somebody by chance that's got a degree in mythology from Oxford University. Unlikely, but possible. But the one god that probably people could tell you is Thor. Because,
yeah, I know Thor.
Yeah, because of the films. Hollywood have made him a star. He's really a comic book hero. He's got all the rippling muscles, the hunky one, so he's popular with women.
Long hair as well. Don't forget the long hair.
He's the sexy, hunky one. And people know about him. Some people will have heard of Odin, the All-Father.
Yeah, I've heard of Odin.
Some will have heard of Loki, the trickster, the mischief maker, but not more.
There was a film on Loki as well, wasn't it?
I don't really look at the Hollywood films, because to me it's just so far from what I'm interested in. I mean, it's glamorized, it's romanticized, and you know, read the books, read my book, and it tells you, explains to you about the power of the legends. And when I wrote it, you see, deciding to read a book is the easy bit. You've got to sit down with your bum in the chair and do it. And that's the hard bit. And it takes a long time to write a book. And you've got to be disciplined. You can't say, I can't be bothered today. Well, you can, but eventually you've got to get back and work and get it published.
Yeah.
And my target was, when I wrote this book, don't make it too academic. Don't make it too learned, because people will fall asleep reading it. But if you dumb it down too much, if you make it too basic, it's like Postman Pat Goes Norse. And I didn't want that. I wanted a blend between the two. Whether I've succeeded, I can only say, you know, I don't know. People will say. But that's more of a textbook. So it's slightly harder work than Nearly Normal. Nearly Normal, I've deliberately done it like one chapter's a bit serious. The next chapter's light-hearted. The next one makes you think. The next one's practical, trying to give you an all-round thing. But they're both very much a coffee table read. It's not War and Peace. They're not that long. You could read them. You could start in the morning, have your lunch, and you finished it in the afternoon if you go straight through. But the Norse mythology,
I tend to like, you know, I have a silence in the morning with my coffee, or I do try to read a chapter of a book, a tarot book, you know, whatever is, you know, tickles me fancy at the time.
Yeah.
And because I got to come away from all these gadgets, because otherwise I won't.
Absolutely. It just depends, you know. It depends what you want to do. But I wanted to write the book, the second one particularly, to give people an insight. What I would love to happen, but it's not going to happen in my lifetime, is Norse mythology to become a lot more mainstream. For people to
need to get a YouTube thing, Alex, and put the history of it all on there.
I mean, people, what I find is that people know more about Greek mythology and Roman mythology than Norse. But you're not Greek or Italian, you're British. You're Northern
Now,
European.
see, again, with the mythic tarot, looking into the book of it, I struggled reading it. Now, I'm a visual person, so I kind of, it would make more sense if it, but I found reading it, I would get lost. I loved the deck at the time, and it come in handy. And I still got the deck, but the actual book was so intense with the information that it, because of the dyslexia anyway, I just and like memory loss. Alex, you could tell me history. You could tell me the history of it, and I probably forget all of what you've said to me, bar 5 minutes of it. Because so you could tell me again, and I'd still be just as fascinated as I was the day before, because I've not got the brain to sink it in. But it's strange. I remembered the tarot, so
for most people, what they want is a psychic reading from me.
Yeah.
Now, again, being a bit stereotypical, but because 90% of my readers are women, if you forgive me, and what most women want to know is, if they're single, am I going to meet the man of my dreams?
Yeah. I was going to ask you, what questions do you ask?
If they're with someone, they might say, should I stay with this pig or not? Cluing the question there, really. Or they might say, I'm in this job. Should I be looking for another job? And if so, will it go well? They may even say, what job should I maybe do? What's my path? About money. Well, my money.
Similar questions. What the tarot?
I mean, really, don't think of tarot as on a different planet to runes. They're not. It's just interpretation. You see, people often say, not often, but sometimes say to me, I know you do runes, but will you read tarot for me? No, I can't. I don't know. I can recommend you. I know 2 or 3. I'm very strict on recommendations, mind. There are not very many people I would recommend to. I can recommend you readers. I can recommend you mediums. But the difference between, after all, with tarot, if they come to you, then they select cards from a deck and you look at them. With me, they pick stones from a bag and I interpret them. It isn't that different. It's just that a different way.
There was a lady who done, I don't know what I've done with it. It's witches' runes. So do you know a lot about the witches' runes?
I do, and I have to say I wouldn't bother with them because they're a relatively modern invention. I'll come to that now then. There are different types of rune, different sets. If you're a serious Runcaster, and there aren't many anyway, you would use what we call the Elder Futhark, which is a set of 24. I use 25, I use a blank one. And if we've time, I'll explain.
I got a blank one.
Yeah, not many sets of blank. Okay.
Really? I didn't. Yeah.
But then there's a younger Futhark, which has only got 15. Then you'll see Anglo-Saxon runes, which have either got 28 or sometimes 33. You'll see Gothic runes, Armanan runes, but if you like, the M1 or the sort of main road for a proper runecaster is the Elder Futhark, because that's what the original was. The others have been added to whatever. And the witches' runes, you see, as far as I can establish, were only ever started being referred to a couple of 100 years ago, which is a blink of an eye. They're not really of great value. I don't believe. Some people want to challenge that. They're not, if you like, the real deal, the proper runes. If you want to do runes, the other thing I'd say to people is, as I've got over the years, a bit more anyway, people have got to learn a bit more about runes. And more people say, like Carrie Ann says, I've got a set of runes, or I've seen them. The problem comes, not really a problem, but there are, although runes, if you're talking about the 24, they're almost always the same to look at. They're carved the same. Sometimes there's a bit of stylistic difference, a carve here, carve there, but you recognize them. But there are 3 different sets of names for the runes. It depends whether you use the Old English, the Old German. Oh yeah, well that's a protection rune, okay, or the Old Norse. Now, it's fair to say, yeah, that's a horse. It's fair to say that the old German, behave yourself now, the old German is more common. And that's what, when you buy a book or you see them online, most of the time you'll see the old Germanic names. And if you remember what I said early on, that's really because when the runes made a comeback, it was in Germany and Austria, where they speak German. But I use the Old English name, which are less common, for two reasons. One, because I am English, but more really because when I first started my journey 35 years ago, the first rune source I came across used the Old English names. But it doesn't matter, and they're very similar. It's just language. So what I call, you showed me there the last one, Ken, to me. The Germans call it Kenaz. Yeah, I call that Ken. The Germanic call it Kenaz. What I call Beorch, they call Bekana. What I can't remember. What I call Tir was. It's really just linguistic endings, because English and German are not the same language. But as I explained a little while ago, they're not that far apart. They're both Northern European languages. So people sometimes panic when I start reading and I say, oh, that's Ken, that's Bruce. Alex, I've got a set of runes. I've got a set of runes, but I've never heard of these names. And
I haven't.
It's because you're looking at, or when you get an instruction book or a book, a proper book or pamphlet, more often than not, 80% of the time, maybe 90, people use Germanic runes, names. But you see, to me, I think, had I been a runecaster 1,000 years ago or 1,500 years ago, because I'm originally from the Midlands, that was a kingdom called Mercia, which is basically the Midlands. I would have used those names. That's why I use them. It's just my own interest. It doesn't matter. If I could start using the German names tomorrow, but I don't want to. I want to use the names I've grown up with. So
I get that. I understand. Yeah.
Don't be put off by that. It doesn't matter really what they're called. But remember what I said. An important key is that every rune is either directly or indirectly linked to a god or a goddess. But again, if you look at books, you will get some disagreement there. Some will say that rune's for that god, and some will say, no, it's that rune for that god. This is why.
So do you think that that's where the intuition comes in, where the rune speaks to you, like as a,
absolutely.
So you can have, we can, like you said, you do the workshops, like you give the baseline of what the runes are, etc. But the actual embedded, when you embed when you start working with your runes, you start you bring your own.
Absolutely. And I would go further than that. If I read for person A and we come out with the runes, then I read for person B, and it's unlikely statistically, but if person B selects exactly the same runes as person A, I'll tell them something different because they're different human beings. And it even makes a difference which runes come out next to each other. It also makes a difference if they come upside down or downside up. And so, this is what point about teaching. If I were to teach you, the knowledge I would give you would be very limited, because you've got, I can't teach you to be intuitive. So sometimes, for example, I'll read for someone and I'll get a name. I'll say, looking at the emotion here, Dave must be your husband. Or looking at the feeling here, Angela must be your mother. Now, where does that come from? That's from me. That's not from the runes. There aren't any runes called Dave and Angela, and whereas I am not a medium and I don't get messages from those that have passed, I always make it clear to people. What I do sometimes happen is when I'm reading, I get somebody who's still here, living, whisper in my ear or walking across my tray. And particularly romantically, because a lot of women are interested in romance, if you'll forgive me, and passion. If it's a single woman, if somebody is about to come into your life romantically, riding on that white charger, I will often see that person standing by your side or by your side. There's a man there. And it's not your granddad that's gone, it's a potential lover. That's what it may be.
So you get the visual as well. I
don't always see them. It's sometimes like looking at a very grainy picture, but I'll say, oh, it's got dark hair. Or I sometimes joke and I say, somebody's coming into your life and they say, oh, yeah, I'm fed up with men. I've been divorced twice. I don't want any more of that stuff. I say, well, it's up to you. You haven't got to deal with him. You haven't got to to start seeing him, but he's coming. He's coming there. And sometimes I might say, do you like older men? Because he's older than you. Or, do you like younger men? And then I usually say, well, hang on, if the woman's 40, I say, don't panic. I don't mean he's 16. I'm just saying he's a bit younger, but that's important too. Money often, am I going to get any better financially? Health, a massive issue for all of us. Somebody would say, I've got a health issue. What do you see? I can't cure your health, but I can tell you about that. Runes have been used as healing, but I am not a healer. And I would never say to people, I can heal with runes. What I have done, but it's experimental, and I want to stress I would never charge for this because it's experimental. Sometimes if people are struggling and I know them well, I've got regular customers, okay? And they say, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll stay up late tonight. I'm not a night owl, me. I'm usually in bed early, but I'll stay up late and I'll focus on some runes for you to give you a bit of a boost with your health to see if it works. And sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't. It's patchy, so I wouldn't charge, but it can't do any harm. If I focus
that's like distant Reiki, that's what we do for distant, and we send symbol. It's like we in tune with the symbol and send it. Very, very similar. But I think the magic is within us, regardless of that. Anyway,
I mean, certainly. You see, what I need to get across to you, and I mean, we're hoping somebody's listening, aren't we? Hoping it's not just me and we.
It will. Yeah, no.
Is that how elemental and how powerful the runes are? They are elemental symbols that connect to human consciousness. I know you accept this, and most people do, but it's not a parlor game. It's not a bit of fun. I mean, try and keep it light, but it's a serious thing. So we're looking at what this can do. And the runes are not just there. I said this on one of my posts recently. The runes are not just, anyway, traditional fortune telling. It's about guiding you. It's about saying, maybe you should look at this path. Maybe you could consider this. This is the strength for you. But again, I know you accept this. Nobody, no fortune teller, no life coach, no poxy guru, whatever they call themselves, can tell you what to do.
No, it's free will, isn't it?
I'll tell you what I see, and what you do with it, how you deal with it, is entirely up to you. So a woman might say, I've been with this bloke 10 years, things have been a bit difficult. What do you think? And I say, the runes are very clear to me. It's not a positive thing for you two to be together. He is not a positive influence. So over to you. If she chooses to spend the rest of her life with him, nothing to do with me.
Yeah, no. I mean, I've done readings and I'm not getting much out of it. And I just I'm not getting anything. I'm not picturing anything from this other person. And I say, look, I'm just not seeing anything. They're more directing you to your career. They're more directing you into that path. And it works out that the person's not been in they're not communicating with that person. They haven't communicated with that person, so it does, again, it's like it is.
And, I'm very blunt. I'm very honest. I did a recent post saying to people, what you get from me is honesty. And a lot of fortune tellers, they avoid the tough stuff.
It's not easy to give direct.
No, it isn't. But a lot of fortune tellers will just say, they'll just tell you that you're a wonderful, warm human being. They'll tell you that you're a goddess. Maybe you are. But that's all they'll do. And it's all pink and fluffy. But not with me. And there's a proverb. It's a Slavic proverb. And it's a favourite saying of mine, really. I like my sayings. I love my words and my literature. And it's better to be slapped by the truth than kissed by a lie.
Yeah.
And if you think about
I mean, I always say, I do give what I go, do you want the fluffy side or do you want, and when I do readings on here, I do I won't try to tell them what to do, but I kind of direct them in the path that's saying that
this is
it doesn't look good to me. It doesn't, No, it's not. I don't see it over. I don't see, but I see it as it's a free will thing. But until you can cover those baselines, it's not going to change.
And you might say to someone, you know, yeah, your financial position is difficult, and I don't see it improving in the short or medium. Or like, for example, if it's a single person and they really, really want to hope they're going to meet another person, another man, say, I might say to them, I don't see anybody standing there. I don't see it happening soon. But I might say, look, you're 40, you're not 80. You know, it's not going to happen in the short term, maybe not in the medium term. But that doesn't mean to rule it out altogether, because that's too far ahead. See, the runes don't usually go that far ahead, because people don't want to know. In 2025, people don't really want to know what's happening in 2032. It's too far ahead.
No. They want to,
They want something immediate. And I think what people are surprised about as well is how down to earth and how direct the runes are. Because it's got this spiritual reputation and pre-medieval and all gods leaping about, etc. They sometimes think it'll be a bit wishy-washy and a bit nebulous. You know, I often say, I'm not a gypsy. I don't work, I haven't got a headscarf. I don't work in a seaside fairground booth. I don't do tall, dark strangers and long sea voyages. Although some women say, actually, can't you find me a tall, dark stranger? Because that's what I want.
And with long hair, Alex.
All right. You've got to think about long hair, haven't you?
I have, yes. Always have.
You know, but take from it what you can, the reading. I've got people that come back reasonably often, which obviously is a nice thing for me. Sometimes people might say, can I just ask you a couple of quick questions? And I might just say, well, let's just link up like you and I are doing now on Facebook Messenger and do it. But I go to shows. I've cut back on shows a bit because they're so hit and miss. Sometimes they're great and you're lovely and busy and you go home tired but happy. Other times you sit there. There's not enough people coming in. There's too many readers there because it's, you know, you are all fighting for work.
No, I've been on them.
And sometimes that happens, and you're drinking your 17th cup of coffee that you don't want just because you got to do something with your hands. And then you look at your watch and think, well, obviously you have to pay to be there. Now that varies.
The table now.
Yeah, most organisers, they're looking for the smaller ones, 20 quid up to maybe 50 or 60. Little bit more. So you've got to factor into it. Again, I stress it's a business. If I'm paying 60 quid, I've got my petrol to get there. I might have to park. I go all across South Wales. Do I think I'm going to earn enough? Well, you don't know. But if you've been to a venue before, then you've maybe got an idea that it's just too small a place. But I know my organisers. I know that some organisers are better organised than others. I know they work harder. They work harder at publicity. They do leaflets, but it's still a gamble. And the only what I say when I go to shows is the only thing you can be sure of at a show is that you can't be sure of anything. That's the only thing.
If I looked at it, if I can put back in my kitty that what I've lost, then I know that I'm doing all right. But if it, you know, but if I'm like, I can't put back in my kitty, I can't do it because it's like, you know, you've got a little kitty of your own, like you said, for petrol, for your drinks, for like,
I mean, most shows, depending on where they are, I'm out the house 8, 9, 10 hours.
Yeah,
now,
it's a long.
If I've been out 10 hours and I've made 20 quid, that's not really any good to me.
No, it's not.
I'd be far better off stopping at home, doing an online reading for which I charge 20 bucks.
Yeah,
although I say online isn't my favourite, I've got to admit, particularly in the depths of winter, it's sometimes nice just to sit in front of your screen with a cup of coffee and not have to get the car out or not have to drive through torrential rain. Or, I mean, in Wales, we get a lot of rain. We get a lot of storms.
Same in Bristol.
Yeah, and in Bristol, You're driving through bad weather. You've got to find somebody's place. Maybe you can't park outside. There are lots of advantages to online. I understand that. It's just that I've got that slightly old-fashioned thing in my head that says, can I come and see you?
Yeah, it is nice doing face to face. You're right, 100%. It is nice. It's got a nice feel to it, and I do like the event things. I've been down that road with events. It's very small events I did,
Yeah.
and I found it too much. I've done like oh, what do they call it? Supper nights. You know, the supper nights,
Yeah, I know.
and it just didn't it I just felt like I was on a conveyor belt. It was too,
Yeah.
yeah, and I
Psychic
just like,
supper. Yeah, psychic supper they call it.
yeah,
Yeah, they're
yeah,
not
and it
normal.
just wasn't for me.
Sometimes I do
I
charity dues. And there's a woman who does,
I
it's
don't
been
mind
a
charity
while,
dues. I
but
will
what
do
she does
charity
is
dues.
she's a dog lover and she raises money for dogs, trusts or whatever.
Yeah,
And what I
that's
do,
lovely.
I go to her house. She's got a nice house with different rooms, and she has a couple of people there, Reiki people, readers. And what I say to her is, I'll take the money, and at the end of the night, I'll give you what I can out of what I've made. And she knows she
Yeah,
can trust me. I won't give her a couple of quid and run away with lots. If I make 50, 60, I'll probably give her half.
yeah.
And she
No, that's
trusts me
fair
to do it.
enough. Yeah,
Yeah, fair enough. But that's because we know each other quite well. She knows that I'll
yeah,
be okay with the readings. I know that she's sensible. She supplies me with coffee, etc., etc. You do all that really. But yeah, shows are difficult. I don't do as many as I used to because sometimes, again, you're traveling a long way. Um,
yeah.
and it can be a bit dispiriting if you've sat there for hours and hardly seen anybody. You know,
Yeah, I've been on that, and it is disheartening, and you feel like, you know you you come back on a winter's night with your
yeah,
suitcase, because I got loads of different tarot decks for different purposes, and it's just like, you just feel, you do feel deflated. What's nice with the events though is that the social side of it, I think sometimes is
yes,
nice,
you do
because you
meet
get
people.
to mix and mingle with people, like-minded people,
You do.
which
And
is
also,
nice.
you can hand out your business cards. There are people who
Yeah.
won't have a reading that day, but they take a card and they get in touch with you at a later stage. I wouldn't say it happens that often. Lots of people take cards and say they'll contact, but most of the time you never hear again. But, it's just one of those things. My next one is in, I don't know if you know Margam Park, Port Talbot. It's quite a famous place in Wales. I'm doing that in a couple of weeks. And then in a lovely pub in Porthcawl. So, I'll do them, depending on cost and depending on availability. You can't do them all. But we see when you do a party night, and it's usually evening because most people want them evenings because they
Yeah,
work.
I've done party ones.
You sometimes find, you see, if you've done 4, 5, 6 people, well, perhaps not 4 or 5, but 6 or 7 people, your head's spinning a bit. You've got a lot in your
Yeah.
head. And then to have to jump in the car, and if you've got to drive an hour, it's quite a bit stressful.
I usually find my 5 is the cut-off point to me, because you're again, it's like a conveyor belt, and it's like, when you get the,
I agree,
yeah,
but I will do more. I think the most I've done 7 or 8, which is a lot.
yeah,
But what I do, I try and
yeah,
have a
I
bit of a
have
break
done
in the
that,
middle. But
but like you said,
I mean,
buzzball.
as readings can be mentally very tiring. Well, they always are.
Yeah,
So sometimes, oh God, have I really got to get in the car in the dark,
yeah,
in the pouring rain, and drive home an hour? But that's the job. If you don't want to do it, you didn't have to go in the first
yeah,
place.
yeah.
Okay, I've about done, unless there's anything else you want me for. We've had an hour and a half, been great fun, but I'm done unless there's anything else you want. Can I do anything else?
That No,
Fine? Are we
I mean,
fine?
yeah, all
I hope
good.
you've
Yeah.
enjoyed it. Have you enjoyed it?
No, it's been great, Alex. It's been
Yeah.
great, and it's nice to know the history of it as well.
Well, you know more. I mean, what you can do now is buy me books. Oh no, you can't. See, I can't resist
do
it.
check Alex's bits and pieces. I've got like his Facebook page. Hi Patsy, we're just leaving now, lovely, but I will come live another time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I see it's on your page. If anybody wants me, they can put it. I know I've got an unpronounceable name. My name's there, and message me or Alex the Runcaster, or they can get to you through me, and that will be lovely.
Yeah.
Okay, shall we say goodbye then?
Okay, thank you,
Bye-bye.
Alex. You take care.
Bye.
Okay,
Ta-da.
bye. Bye.
Ta.